story again. Here's the greatest moral hazard trade in human history. Remember that whole story I told you about the ECB and credibility and all the rest of it? Here's why it's complete horseshit. Because what actually happened was this. I'm a large European bank. I know that I've got a sovereign behind me that if I become really big, I'll become too big to fail, which basically gives me a license for doing whatever the hell I want because I know I'll be bailed. It gives me a funding cost advantage. And it means that basically I can lever up well beyond human reason with pretty much no consequences. And the more powerful I become, the bigger threat I am to that sovereign. And eventually, if it's the fan, well, you know, I'll get bailed out. It's totally fine. So imagine I know there's this thing called the euro coming in. And you're all other European banks. And you know that you could earn a nice little bit of coupon buying this Greek bond at 25%. There aren't that many of them. It's a thinly traded market. But if you can get it, if you lose, fine. But the upside's great, 25%. Now, what happens if everybody really believes this euro story and everybody starts to converge down? Well, I'm going to make less and less money on those bonds over time. So, quick bit of math in your head. How would you make even more money on a declining spread? You've got to use volume. You've got to use leverage. So what you do is you basically get the balance sheet of your bank and you cram it with as much periphery debt as you possibly can. You take all your nice, safe German, Dutch bonds and you throw them out. And you pile on as much Greek debt and as much Portuguese debt and as much French debt as you can. And you turbocharge that, running operating leverage of around 40 to 1, which means your equity cushion's less than 3% of your asset footprint. You make Lehman Brothers look like a prudentially run organization. And you do this because you've got a guarantee. The guarantee is the state. The state will come to the rescue. You get in trouble, you're fine, except there's a slight flaw in the plan. What happens when the euro comes in? You have to give up your printing press. So that means your state can't bail you out anymore. But that's even better because then I become a systemic risk. I'm not just a risk to France. I become a risk to the entire European banking system. Score! I've got the ECB over a barrel. I can do whatever I want because they're going to have to bail me, except it's run by Jürgen Stark and a bunch of Germans. And they're not going to bail you. So when the shit hits the fan, you've got a really, really big trouble, which is where we are now. Core banks get stuffed with periphery debts gone bad as a result of overlending. Foreign banks consolidated claims on Greece, Ireland, Italy, Portugal, and Spain 2011. Last time they published any reliable figures. French banks have over 33% of GDP equivalent on their balance sheets in periphery assets that aren't coming back anytime soon. Add in the Spanish real estate loans they've got on there, run. If you have a SocGen account, Netherlands, one bank, ING, 211% of GDP is its asset footprint. Leverage ratio is over 40 to 1. That alone is 30% of Dutch GDP. They don't have a printing press anymore. You're beginning to see the problem? The result is assets held by banks in Germany, France, and the UK are about double the annual GDP of the entire EU. Here's the too big to fail USA. Top 6 bank assets, 61% of GDP. Any one of them fails, even allowing for systemic interconnections, you're going to take out 10% of US GDP. That's about $1.4 trillion, $1.5 trillion. That's a lot, but when you've got your own currency, you've got the global reserve asset, we can deal with that. We can bail it. We've done it. That's what we did. It cost about $3 trillion all told. That's it. We're now in recovery mode. At least the Brits have their own currency. There's British GDP. That's the size of their banks. You should be very, very afraid now. Now let's have a look at this one. Here's France. BNP Paribas, Agricole, General. These 3 banks alone are taking you up to 250% of GDP, and they don't have a printing press, and they're seriously impaired with bad assets. And now here's the kicker. You know that ECB? It's a fake central bank. It's really a currency board. Because what it does is it says we're not doing bond buying. We're not mutualizing debt. You have to look after the problem yourself. So when you have a financial crisis, you've got 4 exits. You can either inflate, whoops, you don't have a printing press. You can devalue, whoops, don't have your own currency. Or you can do austerity, you can squeeze and hope you stabilize public finances, add liquidity, keep the can kicking down the road. This is LTROs, all the loans have been given to banks. But at the end of the day, you cannot do a Bernanke. So what's a Bernanke? A Bernanke is when you go into the banking system and you grab all the shitty assets on their books and you put them on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. And you call them things like Maiden Lane 2 and the term loan auction facility 3, and a bunch of completely opaque nonsense that nobody will ever understand unless they spend time looking into this. Congress, who basically don't understand anything, are completely oblivious to what's going on. You then flush the entire system out with as much liquidity as you can, and you allow them to recapitalize as they delever, which is why the operational leverage of American banks is now about 15-1, rather than 31 at the height of the crisis. They've rebuilt, they've recapitalized, they've cleaned the balance sheet. As the economy recovers, you know all those assets that you bought? Guess what? Those houses in Glendale one day will have value again, and you sell them back to the banks. It's not a money pump, it's an asset swap with liquidity. The ECB can't do that. It is constitutionally and intellectually incapable of making that move. Consequently, what the markets were pricing in as yields were spiking was the possibility of a breakup of the euro, because if any one of those banks goes down, it doesn't stop at Spain. It doesn't stop at France. It goes all the way back to the German banks. If that goes bad, it's game over for the core European banks, which is why we really have austerity policies. It's about stopping a bank run around the bond market. This is why you've got to keep the Greeks in at all costs, because if you're a bank and you've got 2% of your assets are Greek debt, say you're exposed to Greece heavily, how are you going to get rid of that? Well, you can't. You can sell it on the hedge funds at basically a 20% on the face value, or you can hope it doesn't go bad. But imagine you wake up one day and you think this is going to go bad. You want to sell it, so you sell it first. The minute all those contracts hit the floor, what happens to the price? Everybody else dumps theirs and they go to the floor. You've now made a 2% loss in your portfolio. How do you balance it back? You sell the next asset class before it goes down. Hi, Portugal, how are you this morning? So you dump Portugal, and as those prices go to zero, what do? You look around and you go, shit, what have I got left? Let's dump the Irish then. So you throw the Irish on the floor, prices go to zero. You've now knocked 11% of Eurozone GDP and probably about 12% of your portfolio. You do that in the lending portfolio of a highly levered bank, what's going to happen to its share price once people figure out? So you're going to have a huge panic that's caused by a sovereign bank run, right the way through a currency union, something that's supposed to be theoretically impossible. That's what this has always been about. That's why you keep the Greeks in. That's why you're willing to destroy 30% of GDP, because this is about saving Société Générale, and it is about saving Deutsche Bank from their own over-borrowing and over-lending mistakes.